I would actually like to say, so the link that's in the chat is the same one that's on the slide that's being shared. You can use the QR code as well. So that'll get you two things. One is participating in the book draw, but the other thing is like an 11-page PDF that basically captures all the key ideas from this talk, including an assessment of fitness for purpose, which I'm going to mention. And you'll be able to do this when you're back at work at your own pace. All right, we're going to get started. We're going to get started with a little bit of time travel. Think back to the companies you've worked at, and specifically to the time you joined each one. So each company was different, and it had its methods for getting work done, right? The methods were presumably appropriate for the job, and still, every now and then, there were improvement attempts. Management was changing procedures, adding tools, introducing templates, restructuring teams, sometimes even going bigger, adopting Scrum, Safe, Kanban, OKRs, DevOps, other big things. And I invite you to consider, across all these various improvement attempts, how successful were they and how sustainable? All the change you've seen in your career was put in place with good intentions. Unfortunately, I'm going to guess it wasn't always successful and it wasn't always easy. And it's my observation that in terms of results and of people's experience, your experience, our industry is still not great at product development and solution delivery. And so we're going to start today by understanding why that is. And then we'll answer this question. How can we improve product development effectively and sustainably? So first, let's see what might happen when we try to change things. So here are a few common examples. Get ready to type in the chat. If your company or client, if you're an external coach, if your company has tried at least one of these for improving value delivery, type the letter T in the chat, T for tried. Okay, so the T's are coming in. Okay, a whole bunch of them. Now, still be ready to type in the chat. If these changes have been great, sustainable, no side effect, type the letter G, G for great. I'm getting one more. I never get more than two when I ask this question. So why is that? Why is it that we try to make all of these improvements, but some of them succeed and some don't? If an improvement is not a perfect success, what does happen? Let's take a look at this. One thing that can happen is unintended outcomes. You might think of them as side effects, but it's outcomes, right? For instance, and you know this from Agile, you try to be very precise about your estimation and planning. What happens as a result? You become a bit less adaptable because you put in all of this effort into thinking ahead and identifying the future just right. And by the same token, a bit less efficient. Another thing that happens is that you can increase your risk. Many companies have found this by doing continuous delivery and realizing that sometimes they put code in production that isn't safe. That's a business risk. And a third thing that often happens is that those changes just don't catch on. And the example on the slide about experimentation, that's a classic one. That one usually dies. And it dies because people realize that what they're really accountable for is delivering on backlogs, what's known as feature factory. That's what's considered productive, not running experiments and proving that something should not be built or should be done differently. So lots of good ideas, but we get these effects. The reason we get these effects, or problems actually, is that the various parts of technological value delivery are interconnected in a system. In a system, improving part is not ideal, it's not enough, and sometimes it doesn't even work. Okay, and I'm sure many of you have heard what I'm going to say before, right? Improve the system. Okay, which begs the question, how do we do that? Well, here are popular ideas from the last few years. There's Scrum. Not a bad idea, but it's kind of partial. It doesn't say a whole lot, and that's by design. So you adopt Scrum, but you got the rest of the product development, system to deal with. It doesn't say much. Or you say, well, okay, we'll go to the other end of the spectrum. We'll adopt Safe, because Safe tells us how everything's going to be. Well, that's fine, but what if it's not exactly the best fit for your situation? Okay, many companies are discovering that. Third option, let's just copy paste the process from someone, Spotify being the obvious candidate. The problem with the copy paste is that you don't have their business context and you can't copy culture, and culture is really what makes the whole thing work. Okay, another attempt. Value stream mapping, it will cut out the waste. Like key idea in lean thinking. Excellent idea. I love it. But it may not actually solve your problem because, for instance, if your products don't actually solve user problems, eliminating waste is not what you need to do. Okay, what if you say, well, forget process? Okay, we'll just invert the pyramid. We'll do servant leadership. We'll empower people. Good stuff. I've written a whole book about doing that, but they still need direction. You still need leadership there to say, okay, which way are we taking things? So today, I want to show you a different model. It's a new one. 20 years ago, I started helping organizations improve how they work. I've worked with over 100 so far, both tech and IT. This model is based on what I've learned from working with clients, from everything I've studied, from doing discovery calls with a couple hundred other potential clients, my observations, everything I've learned from my community. And as you heard, I just published the fourth book, this puppy here, where I explain all of this here in detail. And again, if you want to join that raffle, you're going to get you might win a digital copy of it. I'll raffle at the end. Okay, so the model says that really what we want to be focusing on is on making our value delivery system more fit for purpose. Think of it as making it healthier and then fit for purpose. Those are big terms, okay? So let's unpack them and see what this is all about. What I refer to as the value delivery system is an area of your company. It's people and process. So it's the contributors, it's their managers, and how everybody works. This area makes all the way from idea to delivery, some technology, products or solutions, which benefits the company's customers. Now, maybe directly or indirectly, like if you sell to the market or you enable colleagues in the company who then support the company's customers. So this is an area of the company, and already we have a problem here because as an industry, we don't have a good name for it. Think about it. We have perfect names for sales, marketing, HR, finance, but we don't have a good name for this one. Some people will call it product development. That's a term I like to use too, but it's subject to misinterpretation. A lot of people think it's just a coding bit, coding and testing. You might call it IT. That's not bad, except the fact that it doesn't account for the business partners and the vendors that are usually part of this. Sometimes people call this value stream. Again, not a bad idea, but even value stream, what I've seen, the way I've seen it play out is that it has this connotation that work always flows downstream, which is not true. The big idea in a system, and you notice if you've ever worked in this environment, and all of you have, is that decisions made in one part can have ramifications everywhere else. You make a decision in dev and it affects something in business or product. You make a decision in testing and it affects delivery. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So it's more like a network. Now, it might be useful for you at this point, before we continue, to just kind of get a mental picture of the system that you work in or that you lead, okay? And one really easy way to do this is to imagine that what that system makes is a movie. And think about the credit roll. So at the end of every movie, there's this credit roll with everybody who contributed, including contributing decision-making. Who is it for you? In a product company, it may be, product design, engineering, delivery, content. Again, in IT, there is vendors and partners as well. Chances are your company has more than one system. Kind of think about the one that you're in. It is super important to understand that this construct is bigger than what we think of as the team, the Agile team, the Scrum team, or even if you have scaled Agile of any form, less safe, whatnot, it's probably more people than you think, but it's still not the entire company either. It's someplace in between from a magnitude perspective. Okay, so this is the scope of our conversation. And now let's go back to this matter of fitness, fitness for purpose. Now, this is not a common term. If people even use that term, it's usually about products. Does the product do what I need it to do? For instance, headphones, do they do what I need them to do and nothing else? Or maybe if they do something else, it's good stuff and they don't do bad stuff. Now we're applying this to this value delivery system whose purpose is really to help the company achieve its mission and objectives. So really the fitness of it is just how well it does that. Now, all systems are different, right? I mean, our industry is rife with attempts of standardization, but everybody really is different. But I've discovered something interesting. When you look at fitness, in the real world, not in theory, it tends to progress through 5 levels. And systems that get better, they go through them one at a time. It's the same levels, whether they're tech or IT, product-oriented or project-oriented, traditional, agile, hybrid, Scrum, Kanban, it doesn't matter. And something else that's really interesting is that at each level, a certain risk, a different one, can knock the system down to a lower level. Let me show you what they are. A system whose fitness is level 1, people work hard, they have some successes, but they cannot contribute adequately to achieving what the company needs. They just can't. And so, and again, it's not that people don't work, and they may be even properly staffed, but things are just not great at all. Their big risk is that the few people who hold the place together are just going to give up and go someplace better. A system that's at level 2, it contributes to achieving objectives. However, it is neither effective nor efficient enough. So it tends to be kind of behind, and what it produces isn't always quite right. There's like too much work done, or not enough work done, or it's not quite solving the problem. But on the whole, it's kind of okay. This level is actually pretty common when you look at early stage or struggling Agile adoptions, whichever framework you think of. And what happens with a level 2 system is because it's not quite there yet, it is totally susceptible to disruptions. And the disruptions in terms of escalations and reprioritization and where's my thing and when will you be done and all of those, they kind of pile on and they tend to break any good habits that got created. A system that's at level 3, the results are a lot better. You can, in fact, classify them as satisfactory. However, when you pop the hood, you realize that the whole thing is really based on just a few key people who make all the high impact decisions. They're not a team. So I'm not necessarily saying, well, that's like your leadership team. Usually not. Usually that's like a lead architect or a director of this or that, or a product lead. They don't necessarily work together as much, but they've kind of optimized the place to run a certain way. And that's actually the biggest risk with these systems. By the way, they're actually quite common at level 3, I mean, among Agile implementations that seem to go well, but have kind of hit a rut. They're kind of hamster wheel. What happens there is that when big changes are needed, the system can't handle this because everything is a sprint and everything is a team and everything is a template in this form and whatever, but there's big changes and it's not ready for this and it creates a lot of chaos. And it can create some breakdown of good habits. Level 4, much better. Level 4 systems, at least the ones I'm aware of, they have no problem hiring. People want to go there. They're considered good. Everybody thinks of them as good. They do the work. But their big problem is when there are major outcomes to achieve, common ones being replacing an aging platform or integrating an acquisition or like overhauling the UI, big things like that. It's just much smaller than it needs to be. It's not smaller, sorry, slower. People talk about things forever. And yes, they have a process, and yes, they're adaptive, but somehow this is bigger than they're ready for. And what happens there, the risk there is that the people around the system who need the major outcome accomplished, like stakeholders and executives, they lose patience, they lose trust, and again, breakdown. And level five produces all the results that the company needs. It might sound like nirvana, kind of looks like one, but it's actually not rare. Well, no, I take this back. It is not common, but it's not magic. It's not voodoo, and you don't have to be, Tesla or Netflix or anything out of the Teal book to be a level five. They are there. Their risk is that somebody else comes in, usually from a big company that I'm not going to name, and says, we're not going to run things this way anymore because I know better. And so there's a lot of reshaping going on. That's happened to a couple of my clients who got to level five. Not all of it due to me, just to make sure. But that's just how it is for them. So the risks never really go away. They just change. Okay. So back to leaders who want to deliver better results. We said improve the system. We looked at options, some of which were not great, right? If you improve just one part, like you improve delivery, or you do the experimentation in product, or even if you improve just one aspect, you work on efficiency or you work on timeliness, somehow that creates side effects. You need to make holistic changes. And the target of those holistic changes is the way of working. Now, this sounds like a lot, okay? And what this usually results in is, leaders kind of feel paralyzed because, the change is big to begin with. So I did some research. It was, I'm going to say around 21, 22, that I did some research into what did companies do that worked well and didn't. Sometimes they did the exact same things, but in a different sequence. And that was a very important discovery. So I realized, again, not just for my clients, that moving a system effectively from troubled to awesome really takes only 10 strategies. And the best thing is that you don't do them all at once. In fact, you should not. They are sequential. For instance, if your system is at level 2, you only need to execute 2 new strategies, and you don't need to worry about those from levels 3 and 4. And they're also incremental. So you execute those 2, you kind of bake them in. The adjustments are sustained, the effects are real. It's like a normal part. You kind of change the set point, so to speak. So you really layer in the changes, and the effect of this model is to reduce the magnitude and just the mental weight of making such a change. And so it's definitely not, big bang transformation, which I'm sure you all know is kind of painful and risky and doesn't always work. In the book, in the appendix, I tell the story of what a client of mine did in 2022. When I started working with them, they were at level 1. It was a really bad Scrum adoption. Nobody liked it. They thought it was better than before, but yeah, it was really lame. They got to level 4 in just 10 months. And I say this in the book as well, it was primarily because we did things in this sequence. Management was all in on following the sequence and not doing what we in the Agile community have been doing forever, which is everything everywhere all at once. We pile on the goodness. Do this and do that and do that because they're all good and they should all improve things, but systems are not like that. They can't absorb it. And it turns out that some things do kind of have prerequisites. So I'm going to show you in a few minutes what those strategies are. You apply them throughout the system. So they really require a partnership of change leaders. Again, otherwise you're just back to making localized improvement, and that may not help. Okay. So like I mentioned, everything I'm sharing today is from the new book. Make sure you join the raffle. Maggie, if you want to put the link there. To get started with the strategies, you first need to know where you are right now. So you need to kind of determine what is your system's current fitness level. Now, even that, That's not an obvious thing. Again, fitness is not something that we've talked about a lot in the industry. The one area where people do talk about it is Kanban, but it is very much Kanban centric. And what if that's not what you do? What if it's not even right for you? Okay. What if you do projects? Nothing wrong with that, right? So I was looking to unpack fitness, and I was looking for something that was not model dependent, was not about compliance, like how well do you do Scrum? How well do you do Kanban? Do you have a product operating model? Not about that. Not about the culture either. The important thing with fitness is the effect of your operating model. Okay. So for instance, physical fitness is not about, well, do I eat enough, do I consume enough protein every day? It's about, do I have stamina when I run? Can I climb a mountain? That's where fitness matters. So I found these 6 aspects, I couldn't think of them as criteria. They're not dimensions. So I'm going to explain them in a moment. And something else I was looking for is how can we even assess them in a way that is quick and good enough? Not, get super expensive consulting for 2 months to do an assessment, or run big surveys or anything like that. I wanted something that a busy executive can do in 10 minutes. So I'll show you how it's done. I don't have time to really take you through how exactly to do that, but again, if you get that PDF, it explains everything. So basically what we do there is for each of these fitness aspects, we compare the current state to the optimum. So let me explain what I mean by that. Throughput is, the amount of usable working software, working product, really, that we deliver in a short amount of time. What is the optimum for that? And I'm looking for a practical and relevant optimum, not what Google does or what Facebook does. That's not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is what we need in our company, in our system specifically, what would make sense for us. And then we look at the current state and we say, well, how is this versus that? Or outcomes. Outcomes is, how good are we at achieving customer and business outcomes? And timeliness. By the time we deliver those outcomes, do our users, customers actually find them valuable, or has it been too late? And there's adaptability. To what extent does our system work, or in our product, when it comes to adapting to necessary change? Seeing in the chat that somebody's having a problem with this thing. I've been trying to fix this problem. Send me an email and I'll add you to the draw, and let me write this thing here, and I'll send you the PDF. And then there's 2 more that we ask about. There's how consistent are we about producing these effects, and how cost efficient are we about these effects. So let me show you how this played out in one example. A client I had, this was early 2021. When I first met them, they had just raised a pile of money. This was the time when money was very cheap and everybody was a unicorn. And they had 5 Scrum teams. So I'm going to say 40 to 50 people all told. And they were growing really fast. They were kind of disrupting the market they were in. And let's see what I found there and how you would use this to understand fitness level. So for throughput, they regularly made good progress. It just wasn't enough for the growth target. This could have been solved just by hiring more, which they were doing at the time. So things were not really broken, but they weren't great either. When it came to outcomes, they did deliver on backlogs. They did sort by value, but the value was weak because the product strategy was poor. Okay, so that was not great, even though technically they were doing just what Scrum told them to do. In terms of timeliness, by the time they really finished things to get to a customer meaningful state, it just took too long. In terms of adaptability, not painful, but not always easy either. But when you look at consistency, they were actually really consistent about achieving these four things. They kept a good rhythm, even though, again, the rhythm wasn't quite enough and the timeliness was kind of not great. They were very consistent about this, that they got a lot of help from product and engineering directors in terms of, protection. And as far as cost efficiency goes, staffing level was good, but tech debt was hampering pretty much everything. So based on how the assessment is structured, which is, again, comparing the current state to the optimum, as I was describing on the slide, the system was at level 2. Once you know how to conduct the assessment, it really takes 5 to 10 minutes. You don't need metrics. That's by design, because nobody has complete metrics, and garbage in, garbage out, and interpretation, and all sorts of problems. Okay. So the strategies for leveling up. When you're at level 1, you need to do two things. One is you need to get the product portfolio under control. So let me explain what that is. This is sort of the container for all the big work that the system has to do. That is projects, features, epics, initiatives, feature sets, tech debt reduction. So not just customer-facing things, but also business-relevant things. And what you need to do is you really need to get this under control, both in terms of how much is being done right now and how much is being committed to. You kind of know this line of thinking from Kanban. You can use Kanban ideas for that, but the big deal is to actually manage this. And if you'll notice, this matter happens upstream from your Agile teams. It's done by management. And so you have to do this at level 1, because if you don't, the teams will never be able to dig themselves out of the hole, no matter how much WIP limiting they do at the sprint level or at the feature level or something like that. If they have too many big things on them, you're going to get the mess of escalations and reprioritization and context switching. So you need to do that. The second thing to do is to design the way of working based on what you need to achieve. And the big idea with that is really to kind of ask, what does the system need? So it delivers the right product to the right customer at the right time. Is it to be innovative or to be predictable? Is it to optimize for flow efficiency or resource efficiency? In other words, optimize for flowing deliverables out or for keeping people busy? Is it to be collaborative or maybe to let specialists do their thing? These choices are at the level of what I refer to as values. And I think my last talk at Agile, at this group was very much about this, right, Maggie? Yeah. So, if you look at the diagram on the right, you're kind of following the arrows. This is usually done in a collaborative workshop, takes a few hours, and that's it. So the idea is to identify what should we be valuing here, also known as what should we be optimizing for, making sure that everybody is, aligned on just the worldview, the beliefs that make all of this valid. For instance, if we all agree that we're not going to get all the answers up front, which is very much a natural belief, then we're likely to say, yeah, we value adaptation because we really don't know. But if we believe that, we can have all the answers up front, we just ask the questions and do all of this, requirements gathering, then no, we should value predictability. I mean, why not? Based on that, you identify principles, and based on that, you do your tactics. The big mistake that almost all of the industry does is, instead of following the arrows, it goes from the bottom up. It goes the exact opposite way. It reaches for the popular, the familiar, the favorite, the I've done it in my previous company, and they try to bend the current reality to fit that. Okay, and this is not specific to Scrum, it's practically every other method. So what this does, it's basically informed, intentional, explicit design of your way of working. And by the way, if it happens to look like Scrum, so be it, right? The client I described in the appendix that I mentioned before, it came out looking like Scrum. Nothing wrong with that, but don't start by saying, let's do Scrum and then see how we can make it work. Now, I want to say something about these strategies that I'm going to show you. As I mentioned, they are sequential and incremental. So if you do your assessment and you realize, my system is at level 3, we're actually doing okay, you still need to go back, to what should we have done for level 1? So we should have done these two things here on the slide. Are they really baked in? Or did we just, kind of do them once and forget about it? Like, we designed the way of working once, but it's kind of drifted. Or, yeah, we had this big meeting to prioritize the portfolio, but we haven't done it in a year. Then no, you need to go back and you need to kind of really make these things normal habit. And then you go to level 2 and you do what that says, because only then your level 3 will actually be sustainable and even having a chance to go up to level 4. So let me show you what you do at level 2. Systems that are at level 2 usually have two glaring issues. And these two strategies address that. One issue is that there's gaps in decision making. Some of it is kind of hazy or not fully defined or inconsistent, even if they've adopted the framework. And the second thing that happens is that the supply to demand situation is kind of erratic. So the demand is everything in the portfolio, right? It's again, features, epics, projects, initiatives. But when you look at what actually gets delivered, there's a lot, it's erratic. Some things take just the right amount of time, some things take double, some things the quality is not great. It's kind of messy. So we need to do these two strategies to fix that. The first one is easy. You basically look at all the decisions that need to be made in the system, and you make sure that each one has a home. Now, I'm not saying that you need to say, well, we're going to do everything with consensus, or everything is done by management, or whatever. Do whatever makes sense. Again, having designed the way of working, that's even more helpful. But make sure that everything has a home, because you don't want to be thrashing because somebody said, okay, we're going to go with this, and then somebody else says we're not. No, we're not, because you don't get to decide, or something like that. And the second thing is the stabilization. Now, there are lots of good ideas for that in Kanban. Visualizing, whip control. What else? Managing high variability delays, managing bottlenecks, right? Lots of good ideas in Agile. Get to done, break work down, T-shaped people, customer orientation, all of these things. I should point out, though, that stability looks different based on your commitment cycles and your release length. So if you do projects, and projects are the right thing for you, and the projects are like 6-9 months each, then stability there will have to do with basically delivering kind of on time, and the good state of quality. But if your commitment cycles and release lengths are something else, like maybe you do every quarter or every 4 weeks, or you do flow, it will look different. The thing is to have, again, some acceptable and sustainable balance. Okay, so let's just recap. We get the portfolio under control. The way of working is suitable for what we need to do. Every decision has a home and the system is stable. We are now at level 3. So again, if you do your assessment, it comes out at level 3, you need to make sure that the previous things are in place. Now, what do you do to get to level 4? The first thing you do, and that is squarely on the human side of the system, is you amplify 3 things that at this point are probably severely lacking, but we're still okay to get you to level 3. That's really interesting, by the way. One is contributor safety. That is the safety that we talk about in the Agile community. When we say, the safety to engage where others are involved. And also to do one's work without fear of failure or trouble. Okay, because when you do that, of course, that enables a whole lot of magic. By the way, to get to level 3, you could have done with much lower levels of safety, what's known as inclusion safety and learner safety. Okay, but those are not what we usually talk about in the Agile community. Those are more fundamental. Second thing to deal with is you probably have teams, maybe you call them pods or squads or some other fancy words, but they're not actually teams. Look into that because they might actually be work groups. Okay, you can see this by just listening to the stand-ups. You can look at this by, you can identify this just by looking how work is apportioned. You can see this when you see people get in trouble and what help they get or don't get. So this is the time to really get into real teamwork. For the Agilists among you, in my first book, The Human Side of Agile, I put forward the suggestion of having an Agile team leader role, maybe populated by the Scrum Master, doesn't matter. The point is that somebody is responsible for the team's health. And in many organizations, unless they do that, it's a total blind spot. Third thing to deal with is collaboration. Big word, organizations use it all the time, but what actually happens is people cooperate. They're just friendly and professional and adult, but they don't actually collaborate as much as they could. And that's just total missed opportunity. Once you have done these, you can get to the next 2 strategies where one is you start deferring commitments. Okay, those commitments are, it's funny, we don't actually use that term a whole lot in organizations. We talk about plans, we talk about accountability, but the thing that gets us in trouble are commitments. Think about it. You have your product portfolio, maybe you call it your roadmap, like in a product company, it's the same thing. What is being committed to? You could be committing to objectives or goals. You could be committing to achieving certain customer and business outcomes. You can be committing to the solution is going to look like so, and we're going to execute like so. And so the more you commit to things, especially on the solution and execution side, you would be limiting fitness. So the strategy is to work on that, to commit less, especially on the longer horizons. So you may still look 12 months out, but you only commit to the first 6. Maybe you look 6 months out, but you commit only to the next month. This needs a lot of, partnership with people in other parts of the organization because it's going to affect them. But when you do that, you keep more options open. Increasing release frequency is even going to matter. You get tons of benefits, of course. I mean, this is what we talk about in Agile all the time. What we don't realize is that the thing that kind of gets us is not which plans we put together, but it's the commitments that we make, because that's what everything kind of hangs on. The third strategy is to actually tap into more of the available expertise, your teams, your specialists. Anytime you're doing planning activities like product discovery or solution design or release planning or sprint planning or migration planning, I'm sure you already engage people. Maybe they're in meetings, maybe they show planning poker cards and things like that, but I want them to be more meaningfully and collaboratively and efficiently contributing to planning, which is really, what we intend to do with Agile, but a lot of implementations, especially in the lower fitness levels, that's not what they have. People attend meetings, but the time is not well spent. So we want to improve that. Generally, this is about having better meetings. It's not something dramatic. So remember, we're layering our changes. Portfolio, design of the way of working, decisions have a home, system is stable, all of the stuff we just looked at level 4. Now we want to get even deeper into this. Okay. We want to give teams even more decision power. Okay. Chances are at this point they have some. Maybe they can change their definition of done. Maybe they can change the story template, things like that, but those are actually minor. We want to give them even greater autonomy over product matters and system matters. For instance, when there's like a big project, let the team break it down instead of just product people. Or if you need to lead a platform upgrade, let a team lead that, not just the architect. The architect would be part of that and probably, having a lot of say, but not working on their own. Give people more ability to modify the way of working, for instance, to form task forces or form guilds. This is a strategy that gets leaders the most nervous because now they really have to not just empower with air quotes, but actually empower and actually trust and kind of let go of the leash a little bit. But this creates a whole new virtuous cycle with a whole lot of magic. Second thing to do is at level 4 is to just get better at decision making. I mentioned the concept of outcomes before. Think about it this way. Any decision made in the system has outcomes. You intend for some, and then there's the actual ones. There's always a gap. You can't eliminate it. Sometimes things come back to bite you. Get better at that. One way to get better at it is to just get more data. In Agile, we call it feedback. But there's, of course, more data than that. But also just get better at decision making. Much of this talk has been about, thinking about the system and thinking about outcomes. Bring that to your decision making. Instead of just looking at a decision and saying, well, on the face of it, looks okay. Take it to its logical conclusion. If we do this, that will happen. And subsequently, that will happen. And maybe then the whole thing will kind of collapse. So just think ahead. And the last thing to do, and this is really the case whether you're being agile or not, change costs you. Okay, when you change the system or the product, a lot of what we've done so far helps with reducing the cost of change, but you still need to change code at some point. Make sure it's affordable to do. So look at areas of the product where some changes are like really likely and really expensive and fix those. And when you build new things, develop them in a way that makes their likeliest changes affordable. That's where a lot of the Agile technical practices come in. Now, systems usually push back on these matters because they're future looking, which is why this isn't level 4. Chances are people did something at level 2, like maybe there was a piece of technology that was just so gnarly, so difficult, they had to do something about it. But that's all the tech that they dealt with. And the rest was just feature, feature, feature. So now is the time to really get serious about basically the value of your asset, your code assets. Okay, now you've probably realized that all of this cannot exist in a vacuum. We actually need a very specific type of leadership for all of this to be effective. We need leaders to be making decisions with the system in mind, not just their own little space, their own function, their own purview or accountability. We need people to understand that ways of working are not just process. Mindset actually is the only thing that matters there because it will affect the outcomes from your process. They need to understand the relationship between ways of working and culture. They need to be intentional and explicit. Otherwise, you get accidental culture, and we all know what that looks like. And we need leaders who can work effectively with human beings, not resources. Enough with that, right? People who actually lead other people and realize what they're going through. And of course, for each strategy, you kind of need the time to be right. You need people to kind of be willing and able, and you need a coalition of leaders. This is rarely something that a single, even executive, can lead single-handedly. So let's do a quick summary. You have many people. Again, it's not just an Agile team. It's more, they're doing complex work in uncertain conditions. How do you get better? Not by huge, scary transformation or by many tiny local changes like you do in retrospectives. Instead, there's this level in between. And it's this level in between because it's the conceptual level in between organization and team system that matters. You need to work with the entire thing. You want to improve its fitness for purpose. In other words, don't just plug holes, just make it better, make the whole thing better. And you do this by changing the way of working, again, mindset and practices. You start by noticing what the current level is. You look at the lower levels. Is everything there baked in? If not, you fix that. And then you just go ahead and execute the 2-3 strategies for the current level.